The event is called Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Selling to Stores. And we do only have 1 hour, obviously, for this talk, plus 30 minutes for Q&A. But I just wanted, we're going to cover a lot, but we're probably not going to cover like absolutely everything that every single person would want to know from every kind of single angle. So it'd be really useful as well if you give us some feedback, like if there's something that you feel that we missed at the end of the event, I'll email around everyone, and that will really help to inform the planning of the next, because this is the first in a series of events that we're doing. And yeah, it would really help to inform like how to make the next event very nuanced and very specific to particular things that people are interested in. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a big event with 90 odd people like this one. It can be a smaller, or it can be a workshop. Yeah, we're really open-minded about that. We want to kind of create a feedback loop. So I think everyone's like super familiar with Zoom now, but I'll just really quickly like run through the sort of digital housekeeping side of it. You can update your own profile name by clicking the 3 dots in the top right, and you can change that to your business name. You can put in your pronouns if you wish to. You know, this is a great opportunity to hear from our panel, but it's also a chance, like Janine said earlier, for you to connect to one another. So please use that function in the chat to put in your URL, your LinkedIn, whatever you like. And please just feel very comfortable today and adjust your viewing screen to whatever way that you wish to take part in the event. If you want to have your camera switched off at any point, you can go off and on, you're free to do so. And yeah, everyone's on mute, which is great. If you've got technical issues, just let us know in the chat, and just admit a few more people. And Janine will try and figure that out. We've got allocated time, 30 minutes at the end of the session. So if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat and be ready to unmute yourself to ask the panel your question. You can also just wave your hand, obviously, but when there's so many people in an event, not everyone is actually visible on the screen. So it's probably on the safe side better to just use the chat for asking the questions, and then we'll just say your name and come to you. And I just wanted to do a wee shout out for the opening of our exhibition, The Future of Home, which was first shown in London at the London Design Festival. It's coming home to Scotland next week. It's going to be opening at Custom Lane in Edinburgh. The preview night is on Thursday night, the 2nd, from 6 o'clock till 8 o'clock. I think Janine's putting information about that in the chat. So yeah, hopefully you can join us for that. So we've invited this panel to come together and share their knowledge with you, because we think that collectively their experience is really emblematic of the sector. And we think that independent retail is kind of like its own little ecosystem. And our panel all have valuable insights to offer us based on their day-to-day and their longer-term experience too. For example, Ebby and Emmanuel of Our Lovely Goods have developed their own design-led collection of products, which they sell themselves and through other retailers. And they also are the buyers of lifestyle products, so they can see this subject through that kind of dual lens. And Alan's role as a retail manager at V&A Dundee was really pivotal in terms of commissioning new products that engaged audiences with the museum's exhibition programme, and in terms of celebrating and nurturing new talent. Similarly, more people coming in. Similarly, Susan's role as the owner of Life Story blends the curatorial and the commercial, bringing new designs to an eager public and encouraging designers to think about where their products will eventually live. So I'm just going to ask our panel members now to introduce themselves by name, and we can get started.
Yeah, Alan, you go.
Yes, first. I'll go. So I'm Alan. I recently was working at V&A Dundee as retail manager. I have in the past worked at other institutions such as Dundee Contemporary Arts and the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto, Canada. And I'm currently working at Duncan of Jordanstone as part of Dundee University as a retail development coordinator as well.
Yeah. So hi, so we are AB and Emmanuel, founders of Our Lovely Goods. Our an Aberdeen-based business, lifestyle brand, handcrafted candles and skincare. And we work with local artisans back in Nigeria, where we're from, to make our homeware range, and also do a lot of collaboration here in the UK with other small businesses, just to kind of create a whole lifestyle collection as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you want to go next, Susan?
Hi, everybody. It's lovely to see so many names in the chat that I already know. I'm Susan. I own Life Story based in Edinburgh. And actually, when Alan started talking there first about dates and lengths of time, I was just looking at the calendar, and I think today is possibly the 7th birthday of Life Story getting the keys. So I have to double check that. But Life Story is in or around 7 years old. It is a lifestyle and homeware store with a Scandinavian design sort of look and feel, but that doesn't mean that I only source from Scandinavia. I've got about 100 brands and makers, and a lot of them are from the UK and Scotland in particular. I'm working at home at the moment, normally in the shop. My 2 dogs are in the background, so if we hear any woofing, it's me, sorry.
That's great. Thanks, guys. I'm just going to share my screen for a minute. We have broken up this event into 4 main sort of themes. Insider info, sort of do's and don'ts, some really kind of practical stuff. And then hopefully we're just going to end the panel discussion with some kind of happy trading tips and advice. So we'll wait till after all of them to do the Q&A, but by all means, if you've got specific questions that fit with a particular theme, just put them into the chat. Janine will be keeping an eye on that, and we'll really try and make sure that we answer as many questions as possible. So I've got a list of questions here in front of me that were given to us by yourselves on Instagram stories, as well as you know, elements that we have already discussed with the panel that would be good to cover. So without any further ado, I will kick us off. So yeah, insider info. One of the things that I think seems really mysterious when you're from the outside looking in is what are buyers actually looking for when they're looking for new suppliers? What sort of thing inspires a buyer to get in touch with a new designer or brand? So I'm happy to start with anyone who you know, wants to go first, but otherwise, I'll just pick someone at random. So Susan, do you want to kick us off with what's the sort of thing that stops you in your tracks or catches your eye about a new designer that makes you want to approach them?
I think for me, it's probably always about fit to brand, so fit to my brand. I'm the person who's doing all of the buying for Life Story, so it's a very natural feeling for me when something is right. So fit to the brand in my case, and I think in the case for many other buyers, that would be true as well. And then I guess I'm always looking for an originality, whether that's the concept or the design, something about that product that makes it stand out a little in the marketplace. And I think another aspect that's really important is I'll often come upon a designer or a maker who has something that would be perfect or will be perfect in the future for Life Story or for a brand like mine, but they're perhaps not ready to wholesale yet. So I'll always be looking for whether they're ready to sell to a store, because I think, and I know this is something we'll probably discuss later, if the maker or the designer isn't ready for that, then we're not ready either, you know, and it's coming together at the right point for both. So those are 3 things that are definitely important from my point of view.
I think, yes, just very similar to what Susan is saying. For us, obviously we sell our products wholesale, but we have also recently kind of started stocking other brands as well. And I think for us, it's very kind of about feeling as well. So it's just kind of about things that we feel would fit in with our brand and kind of the story that we're telling with our brand as well. And I think as well, for us, we also quite like to look for makers that, you know, things are handcrafted. So our products are handcrafted, and we quite like to just continue selling other items that are handcrafted. So I guess depending on the shop that you're working with, it will be sort of, again, like Susan said, it will probably be, they'll be looking for something in line with their current brand as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think from the perspective of working with V&A Dundee, I think we were always looking for things that are kind of innovative. You know, as a design museum, it was very much, you know, like it's not necessarily always about things that have been handcrafted. Well, that is one side of it. It's also things that are different, things that are exciting and new, maybe using new materials, things that you've kind of never seen before, something that's a little bit kind of out of the blue. But also then striking that balance of, you know, having those kind of products, but also having the products that are from kind of local makers and people based in Scotland and stuff like that as well.
Well, that leads me on to I'm thinking of a specific aspect of Aby and Emmanuel's experience of, you know, it's really exciting when you guys were working with Anthropologie, because they're obviously such a big brand and something that everyone's really familiar with. And it'd be good to get that kind of insider knowledge of like, how did you catch their eye? Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, I'll start here. So, fortunately, it's both of us on today. So, for us, I guess it's different types, different approaches by different retailers as well. So for us, it was more of a situation of, you know, a preparation meeting, sort of that opportunity at the time. So Anthropologie story wasn't one of those straightforward kind of, you get contact and you head straight out. It was barely that opportunity meeting, you know, that sort of preparation we had.
Yeah, so it is quite like a long-winded story, so I'll try and like summarize. But when we started out the brand, we did always have in mind that we wanted to wholesale. So it was something that we were kind of doing from the start. So I think that already kind of helps when you're looking at working with like a bigger retailer. I think if you were kind of going straight to a bigger retailer, it might be like quite daunting. So it was quite good that we had been working with like lots of independent shops already. But we were also doing a lot of other things aside from that. So we were doing markets and workshops and things like that. And it was actually the workshop route that kind of got us maybe like noticed by Anthropologie. So we were doing a lot of workshops in Aberdeen, we were doing a couple in like Glasgow and Edinburgh, and we can actually notice that Anthropologie worked with sort of like smaller businesses to do things in store. And we thought, oh, this would just be like really cool to do. So we kind of just started like hunting for a contact to do that. It's not obviously like something that you'll just find on their website, but we just kind of emailed sort of any email that we could find. And also like called the store as well. And that was probably like the best way. So they then gave us the email address of somebody. And then, yeah, we just got talking about actually doing a workshop in Edinburgh, in the Edinburgh store. And then we went in for a meeting and just had a chat and we planned the workshop, and then COVID happened. So we couldn't actually do the workshop. And so they decided to kind of say, okay, let's do an online one instead. And so that then actually put us in touch with the head office because they were organizing the digital workshops. And then from there, we were planning the workshop, and the lady we were speaking to actually said, I think I'll actually put you in touch with one of the buyers because they're quite interested in your products. And so that was basically it. It wasn't a very direct story in terms of, okay, we want to get stocked here, we're going to contact them. It was more kind of nurturing a relationship, not necessarily with ulterior motives, but we were just quite happy that the opportunity came up. And I think with like the larger stories, it's difficult to kind of get contact details just straight off the bat. So it is a case of kind of putting yourself out there, like making the most of any kind of relationships that you have with buyers and people that you're already in your network, and you kind of never know where you could end up. So yeah, I guess that's kind of the story in a nutshell. But yeah, it's kind of opportunity preparation sort of thing.
Well, because it's interesting that you hear a lot that being tenacious is like an important part of like being seen. But I suppose a lot of designers and makers that I know are working part-time jobs and then like doing their design work part-time, and so it's a case of like, I guess they're thinking, if I'm not going to put all my eggs in one basket, but also can't spread myself really thin, so I can't have like an amazing LinkedIn profile necessarily with like new news posts every other day, and an amazing Instagram and everything. Like, so I guess I'm going to ask you all this question, but you're all going to come at it from like a different point of view. But just very briefly, like, what in your experience, you know, for AB and Emmanuel, the question is, what in your experience has led to the biggest kind of return on your investment of time? Like, which platform is the most important to you? And then the question's kind of turned a little bit differently for Alan and Susan, which is where are your eyes spending the most time? So if I'm going to spend loads of my time trying to get your attention, where is your attention going to be? So let's start with AB and Emmanuel.
For us, for most of our time, spent a lot on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the time we're looking out for brands, not just brands.
How do we get noticed? Yeah.
Yeah. So how,
Instagram,
Instagram, yeah.
Yeah. And I think as well, we from the start, again, I think we put quite a lot of focus on our visuals on Instagram. I think just generally, like, I was quite interested in photography. So at the time that we were starting, it just helped that I was kind of taking like nice photos, I think, of our products. And I think Instagram is one of those places where you can kind of get like a good snapshot of a brand and kind of what they're about and like their story, just kind of like at a very high level. And so for us, like, I would say most of the time that we've ever got noticed for anything is through our Instagram page. So we do put quite a lot of emphasis on like nice imagery. And I think as well, also for your customers, it's good because they kind of get a sense of your like vibe as a brand, your aesthetic, and it kind of draws people in. The same with buyers as well. So.
And how many posts would you say is the sweet spot that you post, like a week or something like that?
Every day.
Yeah, we try and post, we do try and post daily. Obviously, like when we're busy, like it might like lapse.
It might lapse,
but I think just trying to get your content out there is really what it's about. And obviously, like, you don't want to end up just posting like for the sake of it, but there is an element of you do kind of need to keep momentum. That's kind of like the thing about social media is like once you drop off, then
it's almost like out of sight is out of mind for social media.
Exactly.
So as much as you can every day, just keep up, you know, even when you're not feeling like and it's okay. I mean, as much as social media is a thing, there's a lot of superficialness to it. But as much as we can, we try to make the stories as real as our lives, because at the end of the day, our lovely goose is just an extension of us.
Yeah, well, that's super helpful. Susan, did you want to say something about where your eyes are?
Yeah, I think just following on from that point, I think all of us are spending a lot of time on Instagram, and just thinking about those exact points that you guys have just made there. I think it can be really, really difficult to keep up that momentum, and certainly for as you mentioned, Stacey, lots of people who are trying to reach out to stores or online retailers to sell their products are maybe doing it on a part-time basis, or they're doing it in the evening, you know, while they're doing other things as well, and it's very limited time. From my point of view, just thinking about all of that, when I then go in to look at a brand or a maker, I do have that in mind because I know what it's like, but I think it's also really helpful that if you can find a way to, for example, using the highlights buttons to save the most relevant content for your brand or for your product, so that when the likes of me or another buyer goes in, you mightn't have been able to keep posting that December because you were also dealing with a sick child or you were working a double shift or whatever. But if you have your, you know, you have your little snapshots there, we can all sort of see a little, and I think that can be really, really helpful. And I also think wherever possible, if you can have the kind of core information that a buyer might need in your link in bio, and certainly in the email that you're sending, if you're at the point that you're approaching by email, then there's always that reference point, you know, that the timing might not be right at the point that you make the contact, and often it won't be. But if I can go back in and search and find that information, easily. So searching by search terms, as opposed to, I might not remember the brand name even, you know, if somebody approached me in March and then I remember that amazing vase maker or candle maker, but I don't particularly remember the brand name. And I think this is the case for journalists as well. If you're pitching to the press, if you're able to search for that information in your email based on search terms. So just being, you know, just being, I guess, clever about that, just making sure that the information is there and is findable. And then when I do get on that email, there are links to everything that I need in there. That can be really, really helpful. So I suppose just trying to keep everything concise and in one place. I find that really, really useful.
That's all of this is just like golden manna from heaven for it's really useful for me to know, you know, that as well. And I forget sometimes that the highlight buttons are there for a really good reason, actually. And I think what you're saying about just like making it really easy for someone to get in touch with you and digest what they need, because the thing is, like, your Instagram can be this place with like lots of beautiful photography on it, but if it's not clear, what are these your designs, or these your products, or is this just like a nice photo that you've taken of something, like, you know, whereas the highlights can be a really great place to tell the story about yourself to someone who doesn't know anything about you.
Yeah,
exactly. You can maybe have sorry,
I was just going to say, you could treat it almost like chapters of a book, you know, so this is the products, this is a bit about me, this is where I work, and that, you know, those things just in a moment of looking through those would give a really good snapshot to someone. And yeah, just cover those bases.
And I think all of that that you just talked about is also super useful for people who write about design and journalists, because it's all there, like you said, like the sort of chapters of a book. It's like if you're, you know, if you work in a kind of interesting workshop space, or it's all the things that people like me that are writing articles are like, oh, I can turn that into a story. I can write about this person. So yeah. Alan, will we turn to you now and get your feedback?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think I probably do spend a lot of my personal time on Instagram as well. Whether I find an awful lot of stuff via that, I'm not too sure. But I think, you know, working somewhere like V&A Dundee, where we would get a lot of emails, I think it's really clear that to reach a buyer that way, it's difficult, and you do have to be, like Suzanne is saying, like concise and like really kind of like make it stand out that you're good at what you do and kind of how you sell yourself in that sense. I think what I kind of really enjoyed, you know, was the opportunity to sort of visit things like trade shows and kind of have the products there in front of you and be able to like see things in person. So I think in 2019, when we did the first sort of festive design market at V&A Dundee, like it kind of brought everybody to our doorstep. So I think there's like an importance in being involved in events like that if you can, because someone who's a buyer is obviously going to be there and looking at the products and seeing them firsthand. I think there's definitely, it's hard to pick stuff if you've not like physically seen it, like to buy and commit to that. If you're like, oh, I've seen a nice picture of it, it might be great, but actually physically seeing the thing. So I think having that opportunity to see the thing and to meet the person who's made it and kind of learn a bit about what they've done and why they've done it is really important. So yeah, we're very lucky, obviously, in that context with V&A Dundee, just being able to be like, we'll have a festive design market and we'll bring all those people to us. But definitely having the opportunity, like in kind of my personal life, to go out to those events and stuff as well, and sort of see that. And I think also then probably part of the environment of the V&A Dundee is working with people who have like a similar mindset. So you'll be on a team with people who, you know, might see something that you've not seen, are quite like happy to suggest, you know, good design things that they've seen, or good designers, good objects that they've seen that would make sense to sell in the shop, and also just like kind of like, you know, acquaintances, people that you know. A lot of people share sort of products and things that they've seen that I've probably glanced over and not really given the time of day. So definitely, that interactivity is something that I really enjoyed about being a buyer. Like the email side of it is one way in, but I think it is difficult to stand out, especially if there's somewhere like V&A Dundee where it's getting like a large volume of people contacting you.
Well, that's like a really nice segue into the next theme that we're going to chat about, which is the kind of do's and don'ts. I think we've just kind of naturally like brought the discussion round in a way to, you know, at the end of the day, if you are going to make an approach to someone, if you know, like if we recap on what we just talked about, you see an independent retailer, you think, you can imagine your work in their shop, you can imagine like that you are a good fit for their brand. You know, emails coming in, Alan, you've touched on a couple of times, and I know it's something that like our other panelists get to. So I think it'd be really good to maybe with this event, almost like we could create a sort of checklist of like what to include in an email approach to someone and what not to include. So I don't know who wants to start, but by all means, just all chip in, because I think that between the four of you, we could get a really helpful checklist for our audience of like the kind of things that, let's start off with positive, like do's. Let's start off with like, these are the things, like top 3 things that I really want to be in the email.
I would say like really strong, like lead in with your strongest kind of imagery. You know, like I wouldn't expect to open an email and have like loads and loads and loads of images. Like I'm not looking for a portfolio from someone, but if there's something that makes that email sort of jump out at you, something that's quite bold and interesting, I think that's kind of a key point for that for sure.
Yeah.
Can I just go ahead?
No,
It's always
yeah.
difficult to know when it's like no, but I just
No, sorry.
I'll
Right.
yeah.
I was just going to ask Alan, and it's for all of you really, but like, I know it sounds like a sort of silly question, but like, what does it, when you say like imagery, but what does that look like? Is it like, do I attach a PDF that's just got like 3 images on it? Do I attach an Excel spreadsheet that's got like the like products that I've got, maybe with like links to images of them on my Instagram? Like, what does that ideal kind of email look like?
It's a difficult one because I think, you know, when you open the email, like the less, I think as a buyer who maybe did get a lot of emails, the less clicks that you have to do is obviously better. So if it's in the email body and you see it straight away and it catches your eye, then absolutely. And I've definitely received some emails in the past where, you know, the email is a body of text that maybe is, you know, a lot to kind of digest in one go, but there will be a PDF, and maybe the PDF has got lots of like bright images, maybe just like 2 or 3 pages, which is, you know, 2 really strong, like stylized photo shoot shots, and then more information about products and prices and materials and stuff on the next pages. I think I'd being like quite a visual person, like if it is in the body and you see it straight away, then that's kind of, you know, it's making the buyer's job easier. And I think that's probably quite a big part of it. You know, there's like, I know you're going to go on to the don't side of it as well, but the amount of things I've had in the past where somebody's gotten in touch with me and there's no information apart from like, oh, I'd be interested in being stocked, but there's no website, there's no imagery, and you kind of have to do the legwork yourself. And obviously if you're busy anyway, and there's like a mass of other inquiries from different designers, like that one is quite easily going to end up towards the bottom of the pile.
Great. And Avi, what were you, when I constantly was interrupting you inadvertently there, what was the point that you were going to make?
No, I was just gonna, it's similar to what Alan's saying. I think when we started out emailing people about wholesale, we like very quickly learned people are not going to reply to an email which is just text. I feel like it's just not compelling, and especially if you get so many emails. And I feel like the copy that what we wrote was like probably like okay, but people are just not having time to be like, okay, oh, you're a brand, okay, nice, and then click on our website and then click on your Instagram. What we then learned to do was to put in a short email kind of just explaining who we are, and then attach like a brochure of some sort. It doesn't have to be like the full catalog, but like a brochure with just a bit more detail that's quite visual so that they can get a sense of the brand. And that was kind of what we found gave us a lot more traction than just like the initial text email.
And would you, in one of those emails, would you suggest to the person that you're writing to, do you say in your email, like, can we meet up for a coffee? Or do you say, if you want any more information, just get back to me? Like, what do you think is the best, like what's too much or not enough?
So I think there's a balance, it's in between. So when we used to first send these emails, we didn't have a brochure, and we would put at the end like, oh, you could get back to us if you're interested. and we noticed that pulled a lot of people off. So, but when we started adding the brochures, it just invariably helped them to get back to you naturally. You just, went through the
like
process.
open the
Yeah.
communications.
Mm.
And I think it depends as well, like if it's a local store,
Mhm.
it's always nice to actually just go in physically, and obviously they'll be quite busy, but I mean, they'll remember you way more if you just come in and be like, oh, I've got this. You can
Yeah.
bring a sample of the product
Mhm.
and like maybe your brochure printed
Mhm.
out or something. If it's local, that's a great way to do
Mhm.
it. And if it's not local, then just kind of open up the lines of communication, like, we're happy to chat over the phone or email, whatever you prefer. I think people do prefer email because it's quicker.
Yeah. And Susan, from your perspective as someone who's like on the receiving end of emails, can I ask, well, just to spin it slightly, how do you feel about people sending you Instagram messages about their work? Do you feel like that's a little bit too personal, just going straight into the DMs rather than emailing you? What do you prefer?
I don't actually mind it. I think about the whole thing as, almost like warming up and showing interest. And I think you can make friends on Instagram, without being pushy. So the whole topic of approaching retailers, I do think it's a bit like, I don't know, like if you were looking for that perfect job, you might shortlist 10 companies you wanted to work for, and then you would kind of really craft and take your time, make an application to them, or it's a bit like dating, you're not going to go straight in with, you're going to ease into things, you're going to get to know people, you're going to maybe follow them at least on Instagram, or maybe like their work, or pop in and say hi, just like Abby and Emmanuel have just said.
Oh
Pop
my
in
God.
in a just in a gentle way, and just sort of really show that you're interested. I guess one of I get a lot of emails just like each of these guys, and it's very, very hard to follow up. In fact, it's impossible to follow up everything. But often we'll get emails that will say, I'm a big fan of your shop, and they're not following us. We don't know them at all. There's no it hasn't been an interaction. Whereas if somebody says, I'm a big fan of your shop, and there's been some kind of interaction, or one of us has met them or spoken to them, or they follow us on Instagram, or they've maybe shared a post, or they've commented on something, or that sort of gentle intro is always nice. And I think if you're doing that, then it's fine to say something in a DM, and lots of makers will do that. They'll say, I'm making this kind of thing. I know you're stocking something similar at the moment, but if you're ever looking out for it. And that way, when you then move to the email stage, which really should sort of come next, it's not a completely cold contact. And so then when the email comes, that maybe includes the brochure, as we've discussed, or some smaller files of images if they're attached directly, put them through something to minimize the file size, and maybe a link to some more information. And then, you've kind of started to build up a picture, and it's not a complete unknown or a complete cold call by that point. And again, like I said earlier, then the key thing is to have information in the email that is searchable, so that when we do decide, well, we want to have a deeper look into this product now, I think there's an opportunity, I can find that. I probably wouldn't be able to find the DM, because as we all know, nobody can find a DM. So I wouldn't rely on that. I would rely on email in terms of being able to find, and also not to be afraid to follow up. That thing of, feeling like you're kind of harassing somebody by emailing a second time. It's totally fine to do that. I think people should just do it, and maybe it's just saying, I just thought I'd drop you a little note because we've added this one new product to the range, or we're shipping out our Christmas orders at the moment, and I thought of you. I'm sure you guys are busy too, but this is what we're doing right now, or some little thing that is an update. And again, it's another touch point. It's another hello. It's another little friendly email, and it makes you more findable when the time comes.
I think that's lovely, and I think this is really, really helpful. I can see there's loads of messages in the chat, but because I'm maybe if there's anything in there that Janine thinks that we should be paying attention to, she can flag it up. But I did also want to touch on the kind of the don'ts side of like what not to include in an email. Like for example, I write a column every month for the Skinny about design, and my preference is really that someone will just send me a link to their Dropbox where they've got all the files that I asked for, like in one folder, and they've got the names of the products on them, and it also says somewhere if I need to give the photographer credit. Because if that doesn't happen, then I have to do all of that admin before I then send it to the newspaper. So that kind of thing, like also contact forms. It seems to be that people are afraid that if they have their email address on their website, and I can understand like it might be an issue if you've got WordPress security, there can be a security issue, but I've had a WordPress in the past, and I've always just had my Stacey@LocalHeroes email address on our websites and stuff, and I've never really had any issues, touch wood. So I think contact forms are a bit annoying from the point of view of like getting in touch with designers, because it's not in your Gmail thread of who you got in touch with, and it's kind of hard to keep if you're getting in touch with 6-7 people that day to request stuff. You can't remember who you got in touch with to sort of like chase people up. So anyway, that's my 2 pence worth, but I'd really like to hear from your point of view, like what not to put in an email. Is it like large images? Like what are the sorts of things?
Yeah, I think like you're saying, like large images or anything that's going to like make it harder to kind of like break down what you're looking at, like that's part of it. I think it was really interesting what Susan was saying about people who say like, oh, we've been following you for ages, that kind of thing. But I think, you know, as a cultural organization in a city, the amount of people that we would get contacting us, that, you know, it was quite clear to see that they'd contacted other cultural organizations with the same email. So it's like, we might be a good fit, but it's kind of like, well, you know, at least try and like personalize that a little bit and like say why you think you're a good fit for us. Again, it's about keeping it all concise, but there's a myriad of things that we've been approached that would like be suitable for like places that were next door to us or just like down the road. And a lot of time we would say that, it's like, oh, have you tried this? That's kind of really important to sort of remember, is that, you know, yeah, it's good to obviously be trying to contact as many people as you can, but if there is like a way of personalizing that towards that place, that's important. And I think like I would always try and do that as well, is that in replying to people who had responded, it's kind of, you know, yes, you might have a sort of stock response saying we're not interested right now and here's why, but also trying to like take the time to look through the person's stuff and say, well, this is, you know, it's good because of XYZ, it doesn't fit for us because of this reason. And so just like sort of seeing that goes both ways, that, you know, I would personalize it for you, and I'd expect that kind of a little bit from designers as well.
So images, better to have a high resolution photograph or image, and then use a kind of like some sort of minimizing software, zip software, maybe even turn it into a PNG if you're sending it in an email, and make sure that the size in the email is like a normal size, that it's not kind of going into someone's email as a giant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it might also not get through. That's one of the other things that can happen, you know, if you're sending through files that are too large or are unexpected for Google, you know, like sending, I don't know, a link to an obscure image site, it might hit the spam as well. So trying to keep it really concise and small for that reason is another one. We might not get to see it at all.
So to sum that up, like the perfect kind of approach or sort of series of moves would be maybe some sort of warming up on Instagram, maybe treating it a little bit like a job application, in the sense of like selecting suppliers or retailers that you really want to work with and really understand who they are and know how to talk to them. And by the time you get to the email point, the person, the contact that you have with that brand is sort of expecting something from you, and what you would ideally send them is a PDF, or if you have a brochure in the form of a PDF, but if not, just a PDF with 2 or 3 really strong styled images and all of the relevant information about you and your story. Yeah, is that the kind of perfect email?
Yeah, I think so. So it's the onus is on that buyer then to dig a little deeper if they're interested, and if you've kind of led with something really strong, I think that's the best way to kind of broach that.
And what, I mean, when people get in touch, do they normally say, do they normally attach a price list and talk about things like, this is how many units I could produce, or is that a conversation for later down the line?
I personally feel like that's usually a conversation to be had further down the line. Some people might include it, but I feel like generally it's once that more sort of conversational side of things starts up, where you've kind of seen it, you want to stock it, and then you start having that conversation about prices and minimum order quantities and stuff.
Okay. So we're a little bit over time for those sections, but I think it's good because we covered some really good ground. But I really want to move on to this sort of like super practical stuff, because I know that that's the thing that we all get asked over and over and over again. So who would like to, in their own words, in a kind of nutshell, try and describe what is wholesale? Like, what does that mean? Like, what, you know, if in the grand scheme of things, if you are, in fact, I'm not even going to talk about like painting a scenario. I'm just interested to sort of hear your description of like what wholesale is, and then we can move that forward.
I can have a go.
Yep.
I mean, I'm obviously a retailer, so it's not that. I think wholesale is making your products in larger batches to be sold through third parties. For example, retail stores, galleries, etc. And I think one of the things that then comes into that is thinking about how you're going to be producing in batches. This is obviously all of the practical side of that, but also then the financial side of it in terms of working out your cost and making the financial side of that stack up for you and the eventual seller as well.
And Susan, you know, you sell online and in the store, and I guess a lot of the makers that are interested in being stocked with you, they might have started maybe like a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, and they're at the stage now where they're selling directly through maybe their Instagram to people. And so the price that they've arrived at for a cup is based on a calculation that they've done about how long it took them to make it and the materials and so on.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit about kind of what's involved in then turning yourself from that kind of maker who is selling direct to the public to someone who's got a product that's ready to be in a shop?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of resources available to help people who are moving through those stages. So who haven't started, perhaps like Our Lovely Goods, with the objective of selling wholesale. So maybe starting, as you've described, making the cup, to take that step back and start to work out the costs as they really are. So looking at, you know, every detail of cost involved in the manufacture, whether that includes any third party and what their costs are, including things like maybe postage costs from a third party back to you, the maker. For example, if there's a component part being made by somebody else, or packaging. And then looking at your packaging costs, all of it, postage costs, if you're paying for some of that to be sent to the eventual retailer. And then obviously the time, and taking a really deep look probably at the time, because we're all in danger of estimating our time, I think, that we put into anything, and arriving, you know, at a base cost from that point. I think that's probably what you would need to do. And there are lots of resources available online and on Instagram, and we can probably put some links in as well for people who do need to take that big step back and kind of look at the bigger picture. Okay, so I'm moving from more sort of cottage industry to I'm going to start making in batches for my ideal store or my ideal gallery or design museum.
And am I right in thinking from our previous conversation where we touched on this, that you can't have the best of both worlds? You can't really do both with the same product, because like typically what would a commission, a normal commission be in a retail environment?
So retail commissions or markups tend to be between, well, it does vary, and stores will go outside of this, but it does tend to need to be between 2.2 and sort of 2.5 in order to cover the VAT element, which is paid by the retailer when they sell the product. So we do typically see that, and that's not to say that we don't work outside of that, but the average is probably something like 2.4. So what that would mean is if we were selling the product at £10 in the store, we would be buying the product at somewhere between £4 and £4. My maths is not good. £4 and £4.30, something like that. Bearing in mind that chunk is of VAT is being covered within that by the seller, the retailer.
And does it make any difference if you're buying products from someone who isn't VAT registered? It doesn't matter, does it? It's still the same.
No, unfortunately, we're just a vessel for the VAT, so it doesn't really matter. It doesn't make any difference, unfortunately. So the VAT has to be paid regardless. The retailer's bank account is just a holding vessel for that as it moves towards HMRC. So you kind of almost have to just account for it and then forget about it, you know, and obviously make sure that you're keeping on top of your timescales to get it paid. But yeah, it doesn't really make any difference. So lots and lots of small makers will not be VAT registered, certainly at the beginning of their journey, but it doesn't make any difference in terms of that product. It will have to be sold including a 20% VAT element at that RRP.
And a lot of people that are operating at maybe products that are sort of like over the, I don't know, maybe kind of like more expensive end, have said, oh, I can't work out how I could possibly make this thing that I make. Like if I doubled the price of, like I would sell it, you know, they would say, well, I make this little stool or something. If I was selling that to someone, I would charge this amount of money and that would be the right price because it would be really reflective. There's no way that someone would pay, you know, double 0.2 of that. So how am I supposed to make it work? And I think it'd be good to hear what everyone thinks about that. But I suppose what it really illustrates is that, like you said, that this is a big step, it's a big process, and it really needs a lot of, like I think you said before, really like going back to the beginning almost, and really like working all of that stuff out again. Is there any more to say about that?
Not really going into it. I think you covered it really well, Susan. It's a difficult one because I think, like you're saying, we've definitely at V&A Dundee, we definitely worked with a few people where that was the case, where they've done that sense and they were like maybe selling it at that amount, but then weren't used to them factoring in, okay, well, this is my time, and then this is how much I'm going to sell to this person for, and then also factoring in that what is the cost, what is the actual price it should be at the end of its journey, essentially. But yeah, I think aside from just going right back to sort of square one and saying like, what is your time worth as a designer? Like, what is the time you're putting in? And, you know, you need to be making sure that you're being paid a wage as a designer that covers that. What is the product actually worth? Like, and especially if you're thinking about branching out to selling it at other places, it's definitely a consideration that needs to be made. And I think, you know, having, you know, we were quite lucky again working at V&A Dundee, is that we did, on occasion, if we really wanted to work with someone, we might have like had a little bit of wiggle room to say like, well, we'll take a little bit less because we're really interested in like showcasing this product. We want people to see it, and then like in a sense giving people that platform to like have their work somewhere like the V&A, because that platform's like really important. And obviously the retail side of V&A Dundee is that it changes all the time. So it's like someone's work might be there for, you know, a set period of time because there's an exhibition on, or because it fits with something that's happening in the space at that time. But if we were then thinking, oh, we want to stock this all the time, then we'd absolutely need to look back again and say, well, you know, we're only making X amount. We want to be making the full kind of retail markup that we're used to making. So yeah, I think you need to go back to square one. It's a difficult one, but it's how it needs to be done, I think.
Really quick question. Does the commission change if the products that you're taking are on sale or return versus you just buying the stock outright, or is it the same normally?
Didn't really have an awful lot of experience working with sale or return. We generally just worked on wholesale as a given. My understanding is that it's roughly about the same, but I honestly don't know. Susan or Abby might be better to answer that.
I don't do any sale or return either. I used to do it in the beginning, and as far as I remember, yeah, there would be a difference. There's obviously a lot more risk for both parties. One of the reasons why I don't do it, but I don't have enough experience to know kind of roughly what those figures are, because everything that I'm talking about is based on wholesale.
Yeah.
I think for us, we have done sale or return like once, and just because, like Susan said, there is a lot of risk involved, so it's not sort of the ideal model for us. But I mean, it might work for another type of brand. But I think, yeah, like everyone said, the commission would vary, and I think when we did it, it was about maybe 40% of the retail price went to the retailer, and then we got the rest of it. So that was kind of how it worked. But I think just going back to what everyone was saying about pricing of products, I think when we started out, we did start out with wholesale in mind, and I think that kind of helped. But it's also important to bear in mind it's a very different business model from selling to a retail, like selling straight to a customer. You're going to be selling in higher volume. So while it might seem like, oh my God, that's such a low price that I'm selling like that, you'd be selling at probably a higher volume than you would be selling if you were just selling it to a customer. So that's kind of how it works out, you know, like it works out well for you as well. So yeah, I just wanted to also
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good point.
Yeah, really good point.
Yeah.
And I guess the moral of the story is that there will be folk who wholesale just isn't a good model for them. You know? They're actually better off, like if they're kind of happy with what they're doing and they don't want to scale up and really work in larger volumes, then they're not necessarily missing out on anything. It's not like a kind of like this sort of holy grail.
Yeah.
I really want to try and cover some of the trading kind of stuff because we're kind of short of time. I guess, how can I put this? As insiders, like, are there any sort of red flags? Like, if we've got some sort of emerging designers that are watching this, what are things to look out for that if someone's asking you to do that is just a bit of a no-no, like maybe that's not really like the fairest thing to ask for or to be looking for? Can we maybe think of like some examples of like just stuff that you would never do because you don't think it's ethical that you might have heard of? There might not be anything. I might just be a very cynical person.
I can't think of it off the top of my head.
So yeah,
I guess if something just didn't feel right, you know, if somebody asks you for something and it doesn't feel right, yeah, maybe talk to somebody else in the industry about that. You know, ask me if you like, does this seem like a reasonable thing for a retailer to ask me to do? And I'll say, well, yes or no, and maybe get another opinion on it. But yeah, I can't really think of anything. Yes, yeah, can't really think.
I would say like it's probably quite like it's good to you know to exercise your right to be able to say no as well. Like if you do feel like something makes you uncomfortable or something you've seen in a contract doesn't work, then you know take that up with the retailer. Because you know we worked with someone quite early on when we were starting to commission stuff, and we pitched the price so that we're going to pay them for the design work and all that. And at the end, because I was really interested, I said, oh, was this price like good for you? Was this like good work for you to do? And she was like, well, it's probably less than I would normally have liked to have been paid, but I wanted to work with you because it was for V&A Dundee. And had they like said at the time, no, this price doesn't work, then we probably would have been able to like renegotiate that. So I think there's things where like if you think, well, I just want to work with this person, like, yeah, obviously that's fine and it looks great on their CV, but I would say like don't be afraid to kind of like flag stuff up if you feel like it's not quite right.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think we learned that as well. Actually, with our experience with Anthropologie, it was all really good, but the only thing was they asked for a huge amount of stock within a week, which we absolutely were just not going to be able to do. Yeah. And we were going back and forth for ages, like, oh my God, do we tell like Anthropologie that we can't do it? What if we cancel the whole order and everything? But you have to kind of like just find your voice, and they want to work with you as much as you want to work with them, otherwise they wouldn't have got in touch. So like, don't be afraid to say, oh, this term doesn't work for me, like, can we do it another way? So
well, that's super helpful. Let's just really quickly go through some of these bullets before we go into the Q&A. Things like retailers and their competitors. So Susan, does it, you know, if there was a kind of mirror image to your shop that sold completely different products but like kind of similar vibe, and it was like your competitor in Edinburgh, would that really put you off stocking someone's work if it was in another store in the same city? Like, is exclusivity a very important thing, or is it kind of minor? Or
I think, you know, we all want to keep everything varied across the streets, and nobody wants their shop to be a mirror of you know, another down the road. But at the same time, you know, as retailers, we'll have conversations amongst ourselves, you know, so us with our fellow retailers in the city about certain products, certain brands, or if we've had an approach and we know somebody else has it, and we can maybe sometimes work out and see a way. I think generally it doesn't make sense for anybody for the same products to be, you know, represented across multiple stores that are close to each other. I don't think it works for the stores or the brand, but it very much can be a case by case basis, because many brands will have different lines within their product range, you know, and yeah, I think it just being open about that with everybody involved is in towns like the towns that we're in, is as in us personally in Edinburgh, where we have a lot of independence, it's probably worth just being open and having a conversation.
And what are the typical lead-in times if a retailer wants a designer to do an exclusive colorway for them? Or like, I think Our Lovely Goods, you guys did what was the do-it-yourself, like make your own candle kit that we did the photo shoot for V&A Dundee? Was that like a new product that was only available at V&A Dundee, or I can't remember the specifics of it?
No, that wasn't a new product just for V&A, but we have done sort of products that are just, well, we've done like custom sort of candles for a brand, like a specific brand or whatever. So that would be obviously kind of done differently to wholesale, because you would have to factor in the fact that you're making sort of a new product from scratch. So aside from like the wholesale cost, there would be like the cost of for the product development and like additional materials or ingredients or whatever. So we have like sort of a baseline for custom things, and then also on top of that the price per unit as well.
Oh, that's super useful to know, because I wouldn't have even realized that, but it makes complete sense. And so what would a kind of lead-in time be? Like, would it be like a couple of months, or how long would you really need to develop something new for someone custom?
Yeah, it just depends on kind of what they want, I guess. And also it's quite specific to us. We're making candles usually for people. So it just depends on how quickly we can kind of settle on a scent or what they're trying
usually it's making up the mind on the scent.
Yeah, that's what
the feeling the person's trying to get from the scent.
Yeah. So it can vary. Yeah, it could just vary.
Yeah. And do you think that like limited edition sort of, like, I remember I was speaking to a designer a few years ago and they had produced a really successful range with like a whiskey brand, and they were kind of kicking themselves that they'd made it limited edition because it was so popular, and of course they couldn't make more because that's the whole point, is that it's limited edition. So any thoughts on like how, like, just in terms of like happy trading, like when is it good to like do limited editions and when is it not?
Oh,
Kind of,
yeah, we haven't done limited
we haven't,
editions,
So
but
we've got seasonal candles.
yeah.
And
Mhm.
for the summer vibe, for the Christmassy vibe, but not in the sense of limited, I'd say.
Yeah, I was going to say, obviously V&A Dundee, we did the 2 versions of raincoats with Kerry Aldo, and we also quite recently worked on limited edition skateboards as well. So I think there's stuff like that is kind of, with Kerry Aldo, it was working with Hallie Stevenson, so it was a very Dundee-based product made by someone who is now based in Dundee again, studied in Dundee. So it was about like the buzz that we generated from it, and I think we could sell raincoats as much as we wanted to, but I think the fact that it was a limited edition, the fact of where it was made, who it was made by, and the same with the skateboards, it was all about the press around it. So it's like building that just kind of interest in the product itself, because it was limited edition, that it sort of creates this want for people to buy it straight away. Almost is like they know it's limited and they're going to go for it. But yeah, at the same time, you can almost kind of shoot yourself in the foot a little bit, because if it does really well and you sell out within a week, then you're kind of scuppered. You have to look at ways, can we do something similar? As with the raincoat, we do a second edition that's like a different design, different colors, and things like that. So yeah, it's a difficult one, but definitely benefited someone like Kerry Aldo, who's had the opportunity to work with the museum and an opportunity to kind of work on something that was quite heavily in the press at the time as well.
And you touched on like Christmas there. I was just wondering, is there any other kind of seasonality that people should be aware of? Like, I know that in the fashion world, that there are certain sort of seasons that things come out. From the perspective of retailers and buyers, other than Christmas, is there a time of year where there's like where you need more product, or you're kind of like thinking about buying? Like, what are the times of year where you're sort of like taking stock and thinking about what you're going to do for the rest of the year?
Mm-hmm. I feel like for us, at V&A Dundee, very loosely kind of, we would just always be like, well, it's spring, summer, and autumn, winter, and that's kind of like, we'll split it like that, and that's kind of like the main 2 seasons. But the benefit, I think, of working at somewhere like a museum is that the year is kind of punctuated by different things anyway. So there's, we're not just thinking about Christmas, we're thinking about what is the next exhibition, what's the next big event. So there's always these kind of peaks and troughs of different things happening. So I think as like a designer who might want to approach somewhere like cultural organizations, is being very aware of what like that place's calendar looks like. So if you feel like you might have a product that fits a specific exhibition or a specific event that's happening, is just kind of being aware of what's on the table for them in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I try not to ask designers to do stuff for local heroes and kind of like November, December, because I know it's like their busiest time. They're really like just under the pump trying to like get stuff made and get stuff sent out. But yeah, I was just wondering if there was like any other kind of time of the year that people should know about. We could probably just move into the Q&A. Janine, where are you? I'm gonna spotlight you again to bring you in. Did you pick up on any specific questions in the chat, or should I just read out some of the ones that we got from Instagram stories? Or
we've got one that kind of fits in with the what we were just talking about. So Rachel's asked, if a retailer was looking for an exclusive version of a product, say a specific colorway, would it be reasonable to expect a lower markup, i.e. the supplier being able to charge a higher price point as it's specific and exclusive?
I could probably answer that. I would think you probably want to look at the RRP being higher as well. If it's an exclusive and it's limited edition, then probably all of the prices shift, so the margin doesn't change. If the margin changes, the retailer might still want to go for it because of the reasons that Alan touched on earlier, and just having that exclusive and also providing some support for that maker. But maybe the best thing to do again is just to think about it in a very mathematical way, so that it does contribute a profit to that business as well.
And I've got I've got a question that came in from Instagram stories from a maker, Rika Barry. I'm not sure if she's here with us or she's going to watch the recording, but I think it's a really good question. She's like, how many stockists is too many? Like from the point of view of a stockist.
I think that's a really interesting one, because like I think that just depends on who you are as a designer. Like obviously if you've got the capacity to make for like lots and lots of different stockists, then absolutely go for it. But I think you've got to also think about like how that reflects on what you do as well, because you don't want to dilute your brand. You don't want it to be everywhere. There's something nice about, like, as Susan was talking about before, about it being available in certain places. Like as a cultural organization, in A Dundee, we didn't want to step on the toes of other cultural organizations by just stocking the same stuff. So I think, you know, there's that to consider as well.
Yeah.
Does anyone else want to chip in on that, or will I read out another? Janine?
Not to chip in, so I'm not an expert, but I do have a question from the chat, and it's from Laura. So is there better times in the year to approach retailers to stock?
Difficult one.
I think
depends on the
there's
product.
obviously times of the year where it's very busy,
Very
like obviously
busy, yeah.
now Christmas, and
Mhm.
if you approach now, you may just not get a response because it's just very busy, and they may have bought all their sort of Christmas stuff already. So I don't know. I guess there's probably a specific buying times of the year depending on the type of product as well, like if it's fashion, for example. But I would just say approach when you're ready.
When you're ready, yeah.
Yeah.
Things all year long. Just put the emails in there and just let me see you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think from like a planning point of view, you know, like we attended like trade shows, and like that planning sort of time would be spring and autumn fair sort of thing. So you know that might be a time when it's more likely to be on someone's radar if that's when they're doing their planning. But it's a difficult one because I feel like you're always kind of busy with planning, like you're never not planning. So I think aside from avoiding Christmas, I think it is just a case of, you know, trying and maybe trying again and just trying to get on the radar as best you can.
I've got another question here. I think this question is at risk of maybe being a bit like a kind of how long is a bit of string in a way, but also I think it's worth asking because I suppose from the point of view of a retailer, all the investment that you make into like getting everything ready, putting it on Shopify, making sure you've got all the information, like there's a lot of investment on your side to get things ready for sale, either in the shop, like looking beautiful in Life Story, like looking beautiful on the shelf, and at the kind of back end as well, especially if you're doing custom photo shoots with people's work and stuff like that. So the question is, how many units are usually expected? I mean, I guess it's like, it depends what it is and all the rest of it, but if, for talking sake, if someone is making a product and they're a ceramicist, but they're only ever going to make 10 within a 6-month period, like just to get a sense of like what would a normal like order be, or a typical order be? Maybe there isn't such a thing as a typical order.
Yeah, so I think, like you said, it's very dependent on what it is and who it is. Difficult one. I don't know.
I remember a designer telling me that she had got an order from Liberty for 400 units. So that, and I remember thinking, oh, that's lots, like that'll keep you busy for a while, kind of thing. But I know that sometimes when I've needed products from people for like local heroes things, it's actually been, I was surprised as a kind of outsider looking in that the amounts of units that people could provide sometimes to me seemed quite small, like maybe 10 or 20. So again, maybe it isn't really a question that has a definitive answer. Maybe it is just it just really depends on the.
Yeah, and I suppose it's probably like goes back to that, like how worth it is for the designer as well. So it's like if you're just being asked to produce like 5 of a thing and it's not really worth your time, then is that kind of buyer-seller relationship really something you want to invest in? So I think that's, you know, like people bringing in minimums of like the minimum spend or a minimum quantity. That's probably where that kind of comes into play. I definitely worked with people where the minimums were quite low, and we'd always kind of like, you know, it's a difficult one. I think it is just depending on how like what they're producing. Like, are they producing ceramics? It's going to take a while for them to make it, or is it some sort of like print work that's going to be quite quick and can be sort of churned out, so you could order in the hundreds, for example.
Well, that's really interesting. I actually didn't realize that was a thing. So what you're saying is that designers, when they get in touch with you, it'll specify in their brochure, like, we'll only deal with a retailer on an order, like we won't go below a certain amount.
Yeah, I think so. And you'll work with some people as well who maybe, you know, they'll have this over this amount for free shipping, for example, things like that. So that kind of happens a lot. But yeah, like minimum order price. So like, we wouldn't entertain the order unless it's over £200, for example, or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. Just to, oh, sorry, you go.
Sorry, I keep speaking over. But yeah, I think that's kind of how we work. When we started out with a minimum that is a lot lower than it is now. I think just kind of as you grow, you kind of, the capacity that you can make increases, and also then the smaller orders become a bit less kind of profitable, if that makes sense. So yeah, we started out with a minimum order, and that's kind of increased over time. But then again, it's not something that again has to be set in stone. For example, if it's a retailer that you really want to work with, and perhaps they don't meet the minimum, it's something that we can maybe look at sometimes. But I think it just keeps it worthwhile for you, depending on what you're making as well. Like if you're making something that can be produced in like quite large quantities, it does make sense to have a minimum so that you're making like batches that are profitable for you.
Yeah, and the one other point I was going to add on that is this, aside from the work involved in making it worthwhile, one of the reasons why there will be a minimum is because the brand wants to be represented in the store, you know, the not the whole of the brand perhaps, but a good snapshot of the brand. So for example, if we were working with Our Lovely Goods, we wouldn't want, and they wouldn't want us to have maybe just one candle because it's a bit isolated, it doesn't represent the brand fully. We'd want to have, you know, a nice little setup that included a number of the products together. And that's another really important reason why the maker will have a minimum.
Oh, and I think that also raises a really good point as well, that if someone is at the point at the moment where they're making maybe just one product but like 5 different colors of it or something, that it might be advisable to actually sort of think about broadening the range a little bit in the future, if that is where they want to be in the future, because that's something that retailers would be looking for, is a little bit of differentiation of products rather than just one. I mean, I think it is good for people to have a sort of classic product that they go back, that, you know, buyers can go back to again and again. But yeah, I'd never thought about that before, Susan, that that when you're curating the shop, you need to make these displays that tell the story about the brand and has more than one of their products to show. So that's super useful. Janine?
Yeah, I've got so Adam, who joined us midway. So I think the first question we've kind of answered, so you can catch up on the recording. But he's asked, and this could be for everyone, but it was directed at Susan. So what percentage of your products in a shop like Life Story are Scottish, and which are imported from other countries? Is this based on product catalogue, ease of logistics, trends? But I think everybody can have a wee go at that.
Will I start, because it's directed at me? So I guess I'm just looking at the question. I suppose from my point of view, it's kind of hard to answer that, because I sort of know, like, internally and within myself what I want it to look like. So it's not about having a percentage as such. I want to work with the people that I want to work with, and sometimes it'll be more and sometimes it'll be fewer. At the moment, we are working with quite a lot of Scottish and UK based makers. And that is because they share the aesthetic and the values that we do. There are factors like Brexit that are feeding into that a little bit, but that's more about maybe slightly reducing the international makers that I'm working with, rather than, you know what I mean, rather than growing the local. It's because the problems are on the international side. And I guess what factors into the decisions when curating the shop, it's about what I what I want to put together and how I want the collections to work together, but also about product lines and the brands themselves and the people who are behind them. And it's quite a wide question. Maybe somebody else can narrow down a little bit on that one.
Yeah, it's a hard one. I feel like we at V&A Dundee, we would always, we had a section of the shop that was called, this, if you go back to stories again, was designers and makers, and that was kind of like one bit of the shop that we always try and make, like, here's where the Scottish designers are. But I think as a design museum based in Scotland, one question we kept getting asked by customers was like, oh, there should be more Dundee-based stuff, there should be more Scottish-based stuff. So I think, while we were always trying to be about international design as well as just like local design, there's definitely like a lean towards like having more Scottish kind of makers and designers in the shop. And then, like Susan said, like with something like Brexit kind of coming in, it was just a lot easier for the other stuff that we did buy to try and order that as much as we could from the UK. Because, like waiting for, yes, we worked with maybe like 2 or 3 really strong and like big, well-known European companies for design objects, but the amount of time we were waiting for stuff to come in, the extra money you're paying for getting that through customs and everything just kind of like brings its own issues. So it would, again, I don't know that there's necessarily like a percentage, but I'd say like the percentage of stuff that we had that was sourced from within the UK definitely like jumped up at once Brexit was a thing, for sure.
So it kind of sounds like, I mean, we actually heard a similar sort of thing when we had the interior design show in London during the festival. A lot of people were saying to me, it's really hard for us now as a gallery or as an interior designer to work with people in Europe because it's just so complicated now with Brexit. And so their eyes are very much sort of turning north and going, oh, that would be a lot easier for them. And I think that there's maybe an opportunity for all of us to capitalize on that.
Mm-hmm.
And think about how we can kind of open up those channels of communication with them. I mean, London's sort of on our doorstep in a way, like compared to everywhere else in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And we could, maybe that's something for like a future event, is like thinking about what could we do to sort of like raise the profile of Scottish design in London and make it really easy for retailers in London to buy from our amazing designers that we've got here in Scotland.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting as well, because I think there's probably like a window right now where, with Brexit being what it is, there's probably a time where like everything is kind of happening within the UK. It's easier to buy from within the UK, but over, the next 12, 18, 24 months, that Brexit will become like less of an issue, and those things will kind of like not necessarily like be really easy to do, but it'll be easier to do than they are now. So there probably is like a window of, like trying to capitalize on that for sure.
Yeah. Janine, have you got any more things to flag up in the chat, or should I? Oh, can I just check as well with our Lovely Goods and Life Story with the. I know that you guys were up for independent awards. Is it too late to vote? Is the voting closed now, or is it still possible to vote for your brand?
No, it closed yesterday.
Oh, right, okay.
So
I was trying to check the Instagram to see when do you find out?
I think you can still vote, though. I think the votes are still being counted for the People's Award.
Yeah.
But for like
the main awards are, yeah.
Yeah, so I think we find out on Monday if we've been made finalists. So fingers crossed for us.
Yeah.
So do you both want to tell the audience that we've got what award it is that you're both up for and who is organising it?
Yes. So it's the Holly & Co Award. So it's organised by Holly Tucker and her business. So Holly Tucker is the founder of Not on the High Street. And she is like, obviously, I'm sure most of you know, she's like a champion of like small businesses. And these awards were created, I think, last year, just to kind of celebrate like the diverse independent businesses that we have in the UK. So we are nominated under the Small Business of the Year category. And it's just basically an award for small businesses that have sort of navigated like the past year and like thrived as well, and just kind of doing exciting things. So we've been nominated for that. So yeah, the votes have closed for that category, but you can still vote for us because we could potentially win the People's Choice Award, which is, I think everybody's up for that. So.
Well, and Janine's put a link for everyone into the chat box, so you can just click straight through, and you can vote. And Susan, what's the award that you're up for?
So Life Story is nominated for Best High Street Store in the UK. And that award is all about obviously looking at our high streets and independents that are playing a sort of a role in bringing diversity and colour and innovation to the high streets, and that have a community aspect as well to what they're doing. I kind of get that sort of vibe. So yeah, we're just really amazed and chuffed to have been nominated by one of our customers, we think, and fingers crossed for all involved that we get into the next stage. Would be pretty life-changing, I think, for any small business to win. There's a cash award as well as you know, the profile and the PR that goes with something like this.
That's great. And Alan, maybe this is an opportunity for you to tell us what new adventure you're moving on to now after your role at V&A Dundee.
Yeah, so it's a new role at the university, which is retail development coordinator. And so it's looking kind of in the next sort of 1 to 2 years of kind of like building up commercial activities within the university, kind of how we can work with graduates and students on kind of new and exciting projects and possibly products, I suppose. That's kind of part of it. Yeah, so it's really exciting. It's obviously, we're kind of at the very start of that journey at the moment, so it's all very new. But it's interesting being at somewhere where there's definitely quite a lot of space and a lot of kind of stuff to get my teeth into. I'm so excited to be somewhere new, and also this is where I studied. So I studied illustration here, graduated back in 2005. So it's interesting being back after a long period, kind of like coming home a wee bit. So it's quite nice.
Brilliant! Congrats.
Yeah, that's lovely. And not many people know your new email address yet, so you don't.
Don't tell them.
So people can chat you up on Instagram in the meantime. Well, I'd just like to thank everybody who signed up to the event and gave us your brilliant questions. You're a brilliant audience, and we really appreciate it. And like I said, this is just the first in a series. Thank you so much to our wonderful speakers. I really appreciate it. Janine and I both do, and I know that everyone in the community appreciates you doing this. It's not an easy thing to do when you're self-employed or you started a new job like Alan has, to take some time out of it to do something like this. It shows a lot of commitment to the community, and I can't thank you enough. And I'm really, I think that your insights are hugely valuable, and I'm really looking forward to getting some feedback from people who came to the event to see what they thought about it, and I'll of course pass that on to you too. So the event has been recorded, so for anyone that came in towards the tail end, we will like edit it a little bit to cut out some of my rambling at the beginning, and we'll get that online for you. So I hope you all have a lovely afternoon, and thanks again. And Janine and I will just stay on here to kind of tidy up and make sure that we capture the chat and everything. And good luck in the awards, guys, as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks very much, everyone.